I was obviously explaining that the Torah and the Jew and the mitzvahs are all essential and they're God Himself. And the counter argument to that was that God, in His essence, is indivisible. Like it says in Hebrew and quoted very often in my marm, is etzem bilti nischalik. You can't divide essence. They're all eraisim kuchabichu kulachad. And somebody around the table said, well, that sounds like almost, God forbid, chas v'shalom, to say like the Trinity. Like there's three elements of God, and the God's essence is not divisible. So therefore, God in His essence does not contain the Torah and the mitzvah. They're not necessarily part of creation, but not part of His essence, because just to clarify again, His essence, like they're saying, is not divisible. So, and we don't want to suggest that God is split into three. Now, just that statement of Yisrael that Torah, God, and the Jew are one, is obviously the main statement of the Zohar. So it says on one hand that they're all one, but then it says they're all connected one to each other. So if they're one, why do they have to be connected? They're naturally one. So people were saying, Yoni, at the end of the day, this is mysterious. There's only so much we can know. And you're trying to articulate it and break it down and explain God's essence. Ultimately, we're at a loss for words. So they did admit at the end of the conversation that God in His essence is above the Torah mitzvahs, but ultimately Torah and mitzvahs and the Jew are rooted in His essence. So I wanted to get clarity from them. What does that mean? If it's rooted, but it's not His essence, and I constantly get the argument that it constantly says in Chassidus that mitzvahs are negein atzmos, that they touch atzmos, but they're not atzmos, and Jews are mushrush in atzmos, they're rooted, but they're not. It seems like Chassidus is making a distinction between God's essence and the Jew and the mitzvah. Whatever, it gets very confusing, and we're splitting hairs in the essence of God. And I know we've spoken about some of these issues either briefly or at length before, but I was just throwing this all out there because people earnestly do want to understand. But again, when you're talking what seems to be such abstract terms and going to the deepest Kabbalistic mystical insights of God and purpose of creation, it does get a little hairy. So that's basically the topic of conversation.
I think if we can get people to at least admit that it is absurd to suggest that God created the whole world, gave a Torah, chose the people, put us through this whole history, and all of it is really not important to Him. Is that the most absurd statement you can possibly make? Is that not making a joke of Him and the Torah and the Yidden and history? Are they not uncomfortable with that? Because if they're not uncomfortable with that, you're not talking to anybody. There's no one home. What is their answer? If this is all not necessary to Him, then what is it? What, some kind of a game?
Well, they clearly said in that discussion, as He created this system, or as someone was joking, this matrix of the world, and as He relates to it on a certain level, on a very high level, it doesn't necessarily go all the way to His essence and everything like that. On a certain level, it matters to Him as He created the system, as He chose to relate to the world. That's exactly what they said last week. And they're comfortable with that. They're very comfortable with that. Actually, they're much more comfortable with that than comfortable with what we're trying to explain, which makes God sound limited.
Right. So that's the problem. As long as they're comfortable with their half-baked idea, there's nobody home. They're not listening. They have to understand the problem and they have to feel that problem. Eberstedt didn't need anything, but he started creating. And once he started creating, he kind of got into it. What kind of ridiculous statement is that? Why did he start creating? Why doesn't this bother anybody? I don't understand. It's almost like he created a world with certain rules and now he's stuck with those rules. What an absurd statement. A kid wouldn't accept it. He got himself stuck in a system. What system? Who created the system? The problem and the question has to exist before you give an answer. Because if they think they have the answer, they're not listening. Or many of them say, I don't need that. I don't need it. Why do I need to know that? Why do we even need to talk about this? There's a world. This is how it works. This is what you do. Well, if you're content with that, then you don't need Chassidus and you don't need the Rebbe. Because the Rebbe's whole Chiddush was that it is all him, essentially unchangeable. It's him. How many times does the Rebbe say this? Over and over. In fact, in that Yud Shvat Sicha, the Rebbe says clearly that if somebody is wondering how can the simple mitzvah or the simple Jew be essential to Hashem, the answer is to Hashem, nothing is impossible. Right? Nimna hanimnois. You can't say on the Eibishter that this is too small for you to bother with. So because he is all capable, it's not a surprise that he can care about the tiny things that seem to be insignificant. But then the Rebbe says, but the fact that he is nimne hanimnois is not really him. The real him is not that he could care about little things. The real him is that he does. That's the real him. So when he says, this is important to me, that's the real him. Now, this learned question that etzem is bilti mischalik and bilti misgale and so on, how can anybody who has learned a little bit of Chassidus be so confused? If the essence of Hashem is bilti nisgale, it cannot be revealed. What's going to happen when Mashiach comes? He will be revealed. So how do you resolve that? So the statement, essence can't be revealed, is talking about the essence of things that have no bechira. The Eibishter has bechira, so you can't say he can't be revealed. If he wants to be revealed, he's revealed. How can you're arguing that you can't say anything about essence, and then you turn around and say, oh yeah, there are certain rules about essence. He can't be revealed, he can't be divided, and he can't change. So what did you just say? Not only are you describing essence, you're putting limits on him. No, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. And the simple logic of it is completely missing. We're not talking rocket science. We're talking about him. him, not a condition. It's him. What are you telling him he can't be revealed? It's not a very learned argument. It's a silly oversight. You know, the very simple statement, Mi yemalcho matase. Who can tell Hashem what he should do or shouldn't do? You're talking about the Eberste. And you have rules for him? No, it's as silly as that guy who came online and said that you're not allowed to say that the Eberste is everywhere. You're not allowed to say it. He can't be everywhere. Who are you talking about? Your grandfather?
So based on that statement in the Zohar, where it says that the Jew, the Torah, and God are all one, doesn't that sound like, God forbid, a Trinity and God's divided into parts? Like, just for the layman to understand that.
So what does anybody do with the fact that there is Hashem and there's Elikim and there's Kale and there's the Eberste as he is, there's the Shechina? Are we dividing Hashem into parts? That's why you have to say 3 times a day, Hashem Echad. There is Elikenu and there is Adnai, but it's all Echad. There aren't parts. So what about the fact that there's Tlas Kishin Miskashroin Dobida? Why do you have to be connected if you're all one? So that, of course, obviously, we're talking in lower madrigas. In lower madrigas, you need a kesher. In Olam Hazeh, a Jew connects to Hashem through Torah and mitzvahs. Why? Because the neshama came down and is in a guf with a nefesh habahamis. So to connect, despite this condition, you need to have a kesher. Come on, that every teenager who learns Tanya knows this already. Is it not a trinity to say Avinu Malkeinu? Is he an Av or is he a Melech? Or is he a creator? They have a trinity. He's the creator, he is the king, and he is the father. These are not intelligent arguments. But I think the real problem is that nobody feels like there's a problem. You don't understand there's a problem. There is nothing but Hashem. Now tell me what happened. There's nothing but his essence, nothing. And he wanted to do kindness. You're not making any sense whatsoever. That's as bad as the theory of evolution. How did it all begin? Well, there was this stuff. What do you mean there was this stuff? There was only him. Whatever happened is him, because there is nothing else. Is that not the essence of Ardus Hashem? This attitude that he himself is completely detached from everything else. Where is Achdus Hashem? Isn't that Tzimtzum Kipshuti? So we were talking about this recently with somebody. What is this hang up on Dafke insisting that the Eberste can't be everywhere and the Eberste can't really need and can't really care? Where is this coming from? At least in part, it's coming from the conviction that evil, Ra, is real. There's Eberste, and he's good, and then there is Ra, and it's bad. You tell me there's only Eberste? You mean bad is not bad? No, 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 no. Bad is very bad. So if you say the Eberstedt is in the bad also, no, 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 no. Bad is bad. It's not a trinity, it's a duality. There's Eberstedt and there's Ra. And Ra is real. Really without Eberstedt. Why is it so important that the Ra should be real? Because if not, we're all going to sin. So you have to intimidate everybody with the reality of evil. So you ask someone, why are you not allowed to murder? Oh, because murder is wrong. Is that not apocryphal? The Abisha says not to kill because killing is wrong. That's Torah. Killing is wrong, and the Abishta knows it. That's such. The only reason killing is wrong is because the Abishta doesn't want. And why doesn't he want? Because that's him. Because there's only him. If you start off with murder is wrong, then inevitably you're going to have to ask, so how come the Abishta can kill people? It's wrong. So just like the Abishta can't be divided and he can't be revealed and he can't change, he also can't kill. There are rules, you know. The Abishta has to obey rules. It's sad. It's pathetic. And the biggest tragedy is that Rebbe spent 50 years convincing us that it's all that Torah and Yidden are him, and we're deaf. We can't hear it. In that Sikha Yitzhvat, the Rebbe says, "Yisrael le'raisa v'kutshabrichu kulachad." Not kutshabrichu meaning zo and malchus. Kutshabrichu meaning atzmusa yizbarech. Because people do that. When you say, but isn't Torah one with him? No, no, not with him, with kutshabrichu. That's not a trinity? I don't know. I don't know. Why are we so confused?
So, so going back to God's essence. So if we ask who is God, right? Like on one hand, they're trying to say that we can't really know him, and if you attempt to say anything about him, like the Torah is his essence, or the mitzvah is essence, or the Jew is his essence, then you're starting to cut him up into little pieces, and that can't be. But based on that statement of the Zohar that they are all one, how do you get out of the fact that it does sound like they're pieces, that it is a trinity?
Yeah, because we think the Torah is a piece.
So
We
maybe
think the Torah is a little thing, and Yidden are a little thing, so they make up pieces. They're not pieces, they are him. Torah is bli gvul. Yidden are essentially godly, not pieces. They're him. But look, if you say, what is the Ibishter? What is he? What is the answer? He's the creator. No, that's what he did. What is he? He's the lawgiver. He gave laws. Who is he? Who gave these laws? What are we supposed to say? So I remember there was a class in the English department of the yeshiva, and they were joking about one student who was having a very difficult time because in the science class they were talking about solids and liquids, and then the teacher introduced this thing called gas. There's also gases. So the student said, so is it a solid or a liquid? And the teacher said, it's a gas. He said, yeah, but is it a solid or a liquid? He said, there are solids, there are liquids, and there's gas. He says, yeah, but is it a solid or a liquid? And the teacher kept saying, it's gas. Gas is gas. It's not a solid, it's not a liquid, it's gas. So when it comes to the Eibishter, and we say, what is God? Is he a solid or a liquid? No, he's God. Yeah, but a solid or a liquid? No, he's God. So there are solids, there are liquids, and there's God. What is God? God. God is a God is God. There are things that are solids, there are things that are liquids, there are things that are creations, and then there is God. What is God? He's God. That's what we mean by les machshava tfisabe. You can't use an adjective to describe him. The only thing to say is that he's God. Yeah, but is he a solid or a liquid? No, he's God. He's not a solid, he's not a liquid, he's God. So is he a creation? No, he's not a creation. So is he infinite? No, he's not infinite, he's God. So, well, what does that mean? That's like saying a kid says, what is that? And you say, it's a tree. And the kid says, what's a tree? That. That's a tree. Yeah, but what's a tree? That's a tree. Ze keli ve'anvehu. So what is Hashem? Hashem is a being unlike any other. Stop trying to define him by your rules. So what do we know about Hashem? We know what he's not. He's not like anything else. He is a unique being whose existence is real, the way the Rambam describes it. What else do we know about him? He and Torah and the Jewish soul are all one. So who is he? He's God. What do you want me to say? He's blue, he's green. What do you want me to say? He's God. What do we know about God? Torah and Yidden. How could he be that? What do you mean, how could he? What kind of question is that? How could a tree have branches? It's a tree. Tree has branches.
But the problem is, how could you define God? Like, in our experience of life, we turn to God when we have our problem. So is God real, or our problems real? Our problem is real. He can help me. I can pray to him. He can give blessings. But stripping that all away and trying to understand him, and once we're defining him, which is what their counter argument is, now you're starting to give him all these, shapes and colors by saying he's mitzvahs, he's this, he's the Jewish soul in his essence, meaning you can't go any higher. And that's where it gets all sticky, because they have to self-protect, I guess it sounds like, that there has to be this gap that ultimately he's above any definition, including the Torah and the Jew. I know, like, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate again. Like, we, or Chassidus, as we see it, is clearly describing and defining God. No gap, no distance.
Because the mistake is you think that Torah and Yidden are finite creations. And there's got to be a gap between the creator and his creations. So the problem is not with God. The problem is you think Torah is less godly than God, and it's not true. So let's do it the other way. Not he is the Torah. Okay, I understand. You got a problem with that. The Torah is him. And if you think Torah is something less, then you don't understand what the Torah is. Torah is essential, emes la'amite. It always was, it always will be. It is more than infinite. It can change infinity. It's him. It's not a ticket to heaven. It's him. So the problem is not with the Eibishter, the problem is with the Torah. You think the Torah is some kind of a shopping list? Then you don't understand what Torah is. And if you think Yidden are just stubborn people running around on this planet, then you have no idea what a Yid is.
So just to get out of the Trinity problem, which again has been commonly thrown in my face, Trinity suggests three separate elements, but we're clearly saying that it's him.
And there's nothing besides him.
Right? It's just very hard for the human brain when you say God, the Torah, and the mitzvahs are him, but they're not elements. And that's why people try to self-protect, saying, ultimately, we can't really comprehend this. Our mind only goes so far. And the danger in that, as far as I see it, like, I'm living my life every day trying to have a relationship, but with somebody or a being that's, seems to be hidden and abstract. It's just like, it just becomes very messy if I can't really understand, or I can't really relate, at least know what's going on. Only way I can relate to him as far as my experience about how I can get from him, and how I hope he helps me out.
That's worshiping a God of your own imagination. It's not worshiping him. And for that, you don't need a Torah. Make up your own opinion about him and talk to him.
I know, but I'm speaking to Orthodox Jews here who live their whole life. And when this question is posed, and ultimately, if I push them enough in a delicate, cordial way, as far as I heard, they ultimately say, we can't really know. And when I'm coming across as very confident and quoting that Zohar or place in Chassidus, they always sort of weasel out like this is you're in unknowable territory. You're just in unknowable territory, and this is not just from people that don't know so much. This is like we were saying before. This is people that learn a lot. I've been doing this for like 14 years now, and it's scary to me. Like if I can't really know what's going on, or that the Torah and the mitzvah is essential, at least that I'm living my whole life like that, and I'm sacrificing a lot for that. And it just seems like the general population. I'm not trying to put anyone down, and I know this is part of the trajectory of history to try to. That's why I'm still sticking to it, because this seems like a major piece in the picture that's missing. And then people who learn Chassidus say, Yoni, you don't get it. Mitzvahs are noigeya, and they touch his essence, but they're not his essence. I can't tell you how many times just in the last 3 weeks, texts back and forth. It matters. It touches. It's rooted. And then I don't know how to answer that necessarily. Like, what's the delineation between touches and rooted and matters, but it's not necessary. Like, and then it just becomes like one big mess. And like, you have to start really redefining so many terms. And then what's the point of the conversation in the first place? They're not changing their opinion. I don't want to change my opinion. Or is it an opinion or is it fact? And do I go by what resonates with me when I first heard this? As I said in my last video that I made, I learned in Lubavitch yeshivas my whole life. I went to Morristown, and the first time I heard you say in that Michael Gerber meeting that the story of Chabad and why we have 4,000 Chabad houses around the world, when all the shluchim were trying to hash out what the story of Chabad is, and you said only God will tell you, only Chabad Chassidus will tell you that Hashem, God, needs your mitzvahs. And a few jaws dropped, a few people fought it. And for me personally, and there's video of this, you can see me in the video, I'm like, wow, I never even heard that. Like for me, it was always I have to be chassidish and I have to be from, I have to be religious, I have to do this. But I had never once truly internalized, like, wait a second, what does this do for him? Nobody ever told me that. I mean, it was all over the Maimarim and everything like that. But through all those years of schooling, and that's what I'm trying to, circumvent or trying to give the next generation. Like, oh my God, I never even thought about what it does for him. I thought he was ultimately untouchable and unknowable, and Edson built in his talik. You can't really get into his essence, and we have 2,000 years of Masorah that God's unknowable. And like, this is not just like some side question or comment. This is the fundamental, most basic truth of everything.
So, beginning with Tanya, right in the beginning of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says, "Les machshavot tfisa bei." He is unknowable, but he doesn't like it. He wants to be known, so he put himself into Torah so that kol machshavot tfisa bei. What do you do with that? That's wishful thinking on the Alter Rebbe's part. I'm sure there's letters, maybe you can look it up. Somebody writing to the Rebbe saying, we can't understand God, we can't know him. I wonder what the Rebbe would say. 3,000 years of studying him and we don't know him at all. Okay, if it doesn't bother you, then Gesundheit, continue thinking that God needs nothing, because if he needed something, there would be a Trinity. Fine. But it's a pity on you.
No, but they say they say okay, he needs very much a very high level. Why?
He,
Yeah. Why are you comfortable with that? Why do you have to tie his hands? That this is essential. It's necessary on a very, very, very high level. This all really matters to him in the way that he chose to create the world and the system. Like I said, these are the constant, and and it seems like there's so many Orthodox people, whether they're Chabad or not, they're running to minyan, they're fabringing. They've never even really heard this idea till we've been mixing it up, and they're completely comfortable, and they're completely even more religious than I am, and sticking to the halacha and things like that. So
so the question is, so why did the Rebbe bother? Why did the Rebbe put so much effort into convincing us that it's him?
they don't think he did.
Uh-huh. No, it's like the same thing. The Rebbe kept talking about Moshiach, and every frum Jew said, "What are you talking about? We all know about Moshiach, and we all believe in him. What is your problem?" What was the answer? The answer is, you believe in Moshiach like a fairy tale. You believe because you're told to believe, not because it's real. So you can say the same thing about why did the Rebbe bother telling us that it's Atzmus? Because it's Atzmus. What do you,
So it touches Atmos, and again Atmos.
oh, that is so pathetic.
Why?
Because if someone says to you, please don't do that, it's very negaya to me. Oh, it touches you? With a little pinky? Come on, what is this? Negaya means it is crucial, doesn't it? That's what I always thought. Negaya means it's negaya to me. This is crucial to me. What do you mean it touches me? What kind of. Yeah. The problem really is that they don't see the problem. They don't see the problem. They don't see a problem in telling the Abishter that he can't. Is that not a problem? The problem is that they think Torah is dispensable. Someday the Abishter is going to change his mind and cancel the whole Torah. Someday the Abishter is going to choose some other nation instead of the Jewish people. As if that's possible. So you've got everything wrong. You don't know what a Jew is. You don't know what Torah is. You don't know what an Eibishter is. It's a pretty serious problem. And the tragedy is no one sees it as a problem. So the Eibishter really is completely detached from everything. Torah will be soon canceled. All mitzvahs will soon be canceled. And who knows what's going to happen to the Jewish people? So the question to them is, why doesn't this bother you? How are you comfortable with this? You have to have Mesiras Nefesh. And we've had Mesiras Nefesh for every mitzvah. We died by the millions, by the millions. And for what? For something the Eibishter is soon going to cancel. I don't know if that's not a problem for people, then they're not ready to hear anything. So I think the first thing is to get them to see that there's a problem. It's just that they sweep it away by saying, "Yeah, we don't understand." What kind of chachma is that?
Is it a coping mechanism? I remember one of the conversations that I arranged with you with somebody else, a very learned person, and they said, "Well, if we really understand God in this aspect, then maybe we could understand why bad things happen to good people." And this intimate knowledge of making him sound like the vulnerable one, and it's essential. Like, then how do you explain, like you were saying before, all the raw, all the bad, all like he tells us not to murder people, but it seems like he's killing people. Is that does that play in at all? Like, is this a coping mechanism? Like, because I find when I talk to people about this, that there is like a blockage almost. It's not like I'm talking to them and then they find ways out of saying, "Oh, God's not knowable and we can't really understand anything." Um, but yet we're living our lives like this. Does that play into it at all? The whole
I'm sure there are people who just don't want to open up this can. They're afraid. They will have more questions than answers. But that is a sad commentary on 3,000 years of study. 3,000 years, and we're still afraid to ask the most basic questions. I told you the story about this woman in Beis Chana who was sitting there looking very skeptical, but she wasn't saying anything. So I said, "Is there something you want to say?" She says, "No, no, no, no." I said, "If you want, it's open. You can say whatever you want." She says, "No, no, I don't want to ruin it for everybody." I said, "Whoa, there's something you can say that will ruin it for everybody?" She said, "Yeah, but they all believe, and I don't want to ruin it for them." I said, "Now I'm really curious. What is your observation? What is your question that can ruin it for everybody?" And she said, "Okay, if you insist. My question is, who created God?" Wow. In 3,000 years, nobody asked that question. Judaism is over. There's no question we shouldn't ask. None. Because if you don't ask, you don't know. And if you don't know, it's not a relationship. It's just a religion. Chas v'sholem, that Judaism is just a religion.
somebody recently said to me, "You know what it is? You just like to be inflammatory. You found this idea and you like to create controversy."
Yeah, maybe so. So does the Rebbe. Why does the Rebbe do that?
The Rebbe did that. He liked to be inflammatory.
Well, he kept doing it.
How so? With Atzmos, you're saying?
Yeah. And with Mashiach, he kept pushing the envelope. We have to be Makad of the whole world, including non-Jews. Why do you have to always be so controversial? I can just leave Judaism alone. People are doing it, they're fine, leave them alone. It's not fine. There's nothing fine about it. Are we serving him, or are we serving some aspect of him, which we're not allowed to do? Elov v'loy lemidesov. But you can't have Elov because Elov is unavailable. And also the cop out. Well, we can't understand. We can't know. How did you suddenly become so humble? It suits you not to know. That's a cop out. If you don't know, then find out. Learn a little harder. Dig a little deeper. No, no, no. You can't know. That's. It's very much like the Maimodim, or even in Tanya, where it says, "Levaya heitev," and then you say, "No, we can't understand." The Rebbe just said, "I'm explaining it to you very clearly." You say, "No, no, I can't understand."
But in defense of what they're saying, maybe a couple hundred years ago, or even 50 years ago, these ideas were not fleshed out, were not really understood. So when the Rebbe said Megea Natsmus, it touches God's essence and explaining it, at that point, they didn't know. And they say to me, maybe in 100 years, compared to what we know now, it's not really knowing to what we could know.
So dig a little deeper.
But
So
if they
you
would,
could, so you could know, and tomorrow somebody will know.
so one thing is just because we're coming up against the clock here, it says before Hayahu Shmoy Bovad, it was just God and his name. We were trying to understand what that meant. Who is God and who is his name? What is Kabbalah trying to say? Because it's like we're saying at the beginning, it was just him and his name.
Obviously, that's not the beginning. Him and his name is already a state of creation or emanation or whatever you want to call it. But that's not starting with just him. If they don't have the question, it's very hard for them to understand an answer. That's true. So I guess first you have to convince them that there's a question.
Right.
And not accept, oh yeah, fine, we don't know. We don't know, we can't know, that's it. All right, so then I have nothing to talk to you. I'm going to talk to people who do know or who want to know. You can't know. Okay, that's a pity. But anybody who hasn't gotten verplundert and verblunget in all of these theories, when they hear that Hashem needs, it makes the most sense to the uncluttered mind. It's the only thing that makes sense because it does. Even to that the priest from Crown Heights. Remember the guy at the restaurant?
Yeah, Basil, the priest from Basil. We have a clip on that.
Yeah. He understood even as a student. What do you mean God doesn't care? Only somebody else cares. If he's the father, how does he not care? What kind of father is that? Well, he cares, but not really. Not really. So he's not really a father. So the whole thing is not true. It's pathetic. It's so pathetic. I remember the flip side of this. I was talking to some guy and I said, Mashiach is going to come. He says, Mashiach is not going to come. So, but Mashiach has to come. He said, he doesn't have to come. The Eibishter can change his mind anytime. So, what are we left with? Nothing. Nothing is for sure. Why? Because the Eibishter can change his mind. He promised he'll send Mashiach. So he promised. So what are you going to do? Take him to court? Where does any of our confidence come from? Even the Torah will never change. How do you know? Don't be ridiculous. He can change it anytime he wants. The only way we know anything for sure is if it's negeya to him, essentially, then it will never change. If you can at least get them to ask some questions, that would be good. But when they have no question, that's bad news. That means they stopped growing, they stopped learning, their relationship is on hold. And they're okay with that, but that's very sad. Very much like the guy who says, I'll never understand my wife. I gave up. Can't understand her. Can't, no, never understand her. She happy to hear that? Eberstedt is not happy to hear that. He dafke wants to be betachtenim, and you're telling him that he can't, because the tachtenim will never understand him. And then you devote your life to making a dira betachtenim. The contradictions and the nonsense is just.
How does that happen?
So that's a mystery to me. 40 years of Fabringens with a rather obvious theme. Nobody hears it. What is, I don't get it. I don't get it. I shouldn't say nobody, but so many don't get it.
Or not even interested in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I so often bring up the conversation by a Fabrengen or a discussion, and it's not easy because people already know me by now. One person said, "Oh, you're just like a mishachist. You see everything through this one lens." And I'll bring it up, and then weeks later and months later, they'll say, "Oh, remember that discussion that Fabrengen?" And I saw something. It constantly happens. It gets in their head, and how do you bring a sort of controversial idea, although it shouldn't be? And it's not easy. You have to put yourself out there, and like God put himself out there, coming down to the mountain and spilling his guts. And all these years later, people still don't think it's his guts. They think it's only a certain level. Like we were in the middle of this discussion, and somebody was learning Lakutei Torah, and they would come over and say, I learned this morning, and it constantly said, the Alter Rebbe was saying, Ani Havaya Leishanisi, I am God who hasn't changed, which means he's unaffected really ultimately by anything that we do. The whole exact opposite probably what the mimer is trying to say. It's just like, it just seems like there's so much damage that has to be undone and redefining of terms. And just after doing this, and you've been doing it much longer than me, it feels like there is a shift, but it just seems like way too difficult to change people's perspectives unless they're willing to hear.
Mm-hmm. It'll happen. It has to happen. It takes 40 years to understand what your teacher was saying.
So we're close. Tafshin and Dalit, 1994.
10 years to go.
So just because we're just closing up, so etzem bilti nischalik doesn't not going on God's essence. That's going on. That term is used specifically for when in Chassidus?
For the essence of created beings, because they have no bechira. But if you're talking about a Baal bechira, what do you mean he can't be revealed? If he wants to be revealed, he reveals himself. And if he wants to change, he'll change himself. How do you dictate rules to the Eibishter?
Gotcha. And
the whole subject of the ahava kamayim, that the Rebbe says that is the best and most available ahava, is the ahava kamayim, kamayim haponim el ponim. The way the Eibishter loves you, you love him back. We have to love him to the degree of giving up our entire existence. Is that kamayim haponim? We have to love him a lot more than he loves us, because he really doesn't care. It's very, very tragic that we can actually say that about him. Oh, no, he cares, he just doesn't need you. What a horrible statement. Say that to your kids. We really care about you, we just don't need you.
they think their kids are optional, relating to our discussion last week about birth control. Once I chose to have you, now I need you. But ultimately, and that's the example that they constantly use about God. Once he chose, now he needs. Meaning you're optional, just like a father or mother who decide to have kids, and now you mean a lot, and they're perfectly comfortable with that. Like God could have created us, he could not have created us. The Torah and the mitzvahs, going back to the beginning part of our conversation. And now that we're here, the system idea, the matrix idea, now it's important. Just like somebody has 6 kids and they're like, should we have another one? Should we go on birth control? Okay, fine, we'll have another one. But very easily that kid could not exist in the world. And there's a heter. You can get a heter from a rabbi to say, yeah, go on birth control. So it's optional. But now that he chose, which is the number one pushback.
Yeah, so 2 things. First of all, why did he choose? And number 2, if it was optional, it is still optional. If I didn't need, then I still don't need. Nothing becomes more essential after the fact. It's nonsense. It's possible that you thought it was optional. Now you discover it really wasn't optional. Okay. But it was never optional. That's the whole point. You thought it was optional. But you can't, something cannot become essential if it's not essential. If you make something up, it can't become real. You made it up.
So God did not have the option of going on birth control before he created 8 billion human beings.
There's a difference between optional and option. In the Eibishter, everything is possible because he can do whatever he wants. Torah and Yidden are not an option. In other words, we are not an option to him because of who he is, not because he has no choice. In other words, nothing forces him or makes him be one with Torah and mitzvahs. He just is one with Torah and mitzvahs, which doesn't mean that he is not a Baal Bechira. He is a Baal Bechira, but certain things are not an option. Bein kach u bein kach bonai heim u lahachlifam be'uma acheres I efshe. Or Eini Yochel, whatever the Girsa is. So is somebody telling Hashem that he has to have Yidden, that he has to have Torah? No, nobody's telling him. It just is him. So is that free choice? Yeah, it's free choice. Because it's not coming from the outside. But it doesn't mean that there is an option. There's no option.
But with parents having another kid or not, that is an option.
That's why it's a mitzvah. If there was no option, how can it be a mitzvah?
So then your kids are always just optional to you?
Unless you discover that it was never really an option on some soul level or something.
Are we supposed to discover that? Is that even possible to discover that?
Yeah. You have to wonder what was the Akedah? Even though the Eibishter never meant for him to shecht Yitzchak, but what was the whole point? You have a son, you wanted him for a long time, you love him very much, but you can give him up. Optional. Then the Eibishter says, no, don't. Does that mean the message is that it's not optional? You can't be you without your son. So again, on some soul level, even if you do offer him up as a sacrifice, he's still your son. That's essential. But that's all in created beings. So the simple question you can start off with is, in the beginning, there was just him. What happened? Take me through the steps. There's just him. And then he wants to do kindness. Whoa, 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 whoa. Where did you just jump from? There was just him, and him decided to create the world. Very good question. Answer is Bishvil Yisrael, Bishvil HaTorah, which means Torah and Yisrael were there as him. And because of that, he created the world. But before you give them the answer, let them struggle with the question. There's just him, and then all of a sudden there's all sorts of stuff. Teva HaToiv, Ein Melech B'Olam. Where did all this come from? By the way, what does it mean, Ein Melech B'Olam? Who made that rule? Like, it's a rule in nature. The Eibishter has to abide by that rule. There's no such rule in nature. Where does it say Teva HaToiv is Lehetiv? Who made that rule? Since when is God governed by rules? Just ask the question. You know, the cop out, of course, will be, oh, we don't know. Okay, if you don't know, go back to school. Don't make arguments. All politely, of course. With all due respect.
I guess we'll pick up next time on this idea of our children.
Okay.
Thank you so much. This was really helpful. And Mr. Hashem, see you.
It's still a good project.
It's definitely picking up steam, Baruch Hashem. And thank you. And again, all these years later, I just don't get people's issues with it. And they'll tell me I'm not learned enough because there's intricacies that I don't understand. And
you're not learned enough not to know.
Exactly. It's much deeper than I'm simplifying it. And but
Yeah.
for me, I've been I've been very involved for the last, as I said, 14 years. And each time I hear it, it just makes more and more sense. And then seeing the sources inside, it definitely seems to be what the Rebbe was conveying. So thank you very much. And
yeah, you just sent me that little clip where the Rebbe says you have to remember when you're doing a mitzvah that this is negeya higher and higher to a level where there's nothing higher. Simplistic? You got to hang that up on a placard or something. It's almost like the Rebbe is anticipating. No, it's higher. It's higher than that. The Rebbe said, no, there is nothing higher. Okay.
thank you.
Happy hunting.